Okay, so I think where we left off last time was we just finished creating the form and the star review components so that we can now create reviews for each airline. So just as an example, if I create a new fake test review and add a score to that, when we submit that, we'll see the review count over here increase by 1. And if we jump into our console, we can actually see over on the Rails side, we made a post request through our API that we created back in the first video. And now we are actually inserting a new review for that airline. So you can see the information that I just entered in that form getting passed through for all the fields here. And that's getting saved in our database now. So the next thing that we want to do then is we need to add the logic so that we can actually grab that list of reviews now and display it here on the page. So let's jump back over into our code. And over in my airline directory, so inside of components, I'm going to create a new file and call it review.js. And then inside of this, let's go ahead and import React. And then I'm just going to create a new component. So I'm going to call this review. And it's going to take props as an argument. And then inside of this component, we can basically structure what we want each review to look like. So I'm going to give this a class name of cards. This will be like a review card. And then inside of this, we basically want to pass in the score, title, and description for a review. So inside of here, I'm going to create a little wrapper container around what will be our score. And then what we'll do is basically bring in a little star rating here. But I'm just going to right now call this, I'm going to give it a class name of like rating container. And then inside of that, we can create another div. And we'll just call this our rating score for now. And then outside of that, we want to pass in our title here. So I'm going to create just a little title div as well as a description. So what we can do now is back over in our airline component, we can actually import our new review component. And then down below in our code, what we can do now is recall that our list of reviews for a given airline should be available on our airline object under this included key. So we should have an array of all of our reviews. And from what we did with our handle submit method in the last video, we should now actually be appending each new review that gets created onto the end of this array. So what we can do now with our review component is I'm going to create a new variable and call it reviews. And I'm just going to set that equal to airline.included.map. And then I'm going to do, let's do item and index, and then I'm going to create an arrow function. And then what we can do in here is for each review that we have for an airline, let's return an instance of our review component. So I'm going to say review here, and then what we want to do is pass in key and set that to index. And then what I want to do is I want to pass down the attributes for each review. So we could do attributes and set that equal to item.attributes. And with that, let's grab this new variable, and then down below in our JSX, where we have this placeholder, let's actually replace this with our reviews variable. And let's see what that looks like now if we try to reload the page. It looks like I'm trying to map over the values in the included key before it's actually being defined. So let's try, if we jump back over here, if we just, instead of defining a const here, if we do let reviews, and then similar to what we did below, if we just wrap this in a check that checks if our data is loaded, and also checks that airline.included exists. Basically, we'll just say let reviews be undefined initially, and then once we actually have our data, let's build our list of reviews. So let's see if that fixes the problem. Okay, so let's see, attributes. So we're passing down attributes to our review. So what we want to do now is we'll have that available in props. So what we can do is probably use the object destructuring and basically say score, title, and description. And set that equal to props.attributes. And now what we can do is pass in our score as well as our title and our description. So let's reload the page and see if that works. Cool. Okay, so you can see now we're rendering all the reviews that exist for this airline over on the left. So for each review, we have the score, title, and description. So now I think we're going to run into a bug that I introduced in the last video. So let's test this out. If we create a new review, let's see what happens when we submit this now. So the page explodes, and if we look, so let's jump back over into our code for a second, and let's take a look. So in the last video, when we created a new review, what we did was we then appended that review onto the end of our existing reviews array, which was under the included key on airline. So let's take a look when we do that at what the data looks like for that array. So console log included, and then let's also, when we're mapping over our data here, let's console log basically each review item to see what our data looks like, to see kind of this mismatch, and then we'll fix it. So let's reload the page. Let me just take a look at the console. So when we initially get the data from our API, this should have the structure of what the data looks like for each review. So if you look at this data, you can see what we have for each review is pretty simple. So we basically just have attributes and ID as our top level keys in this object, and then within attributes we have the actual attributes for each review. So let's see what happens if we create a new review. So I'm just going to create a fake review and we'll submit that. So our code is going to explode. But if we look here now, so this should be basically the data for included. If you look at the item at index 7 in our array, that's the new review that I just added. You can see it's actually using a different format than the actual data we already have in included. So because last time we passed in the response.data, here when we added it to the array, what we actually need to do is go a level deeper and do response.data.data to make this match the existing data structure that we have inside of that included array. So if we change that, I think that should fix the problem. So I'm going to get rid of these. And let's reload the page, and let's see what happens now if I create a new review again. So if we look over here, if we scroll down, we can see the last review has a score of 3. So let's create a new review that has a score of like 5 and submit that. We can see the page didn't explode, and if we look now, you can see that actually appended on that value now, and everything's working. So with that fix, we should be good to have basically the reviews getting displayed onto the page in real time as they're getting created. So now that that's all working, let's actually add a little bit of style to make this look a little bit nicer. So back over my review component, I'm going to import styled from styled components. And I'm just going to create new components that map to basically each of our classes down below. So I'm going to create a new CRUD component that's going to be a div. And then we'll also do the same thing for basically our rating container, as well as rating score, as well as title and description. And then all that I want to do is just try to clean this up to make it look a little bit better. So inside of my card component, let's just give this a border for each review. So we'll do like 1 pixel solid and just a light border color. And then I also want to give this a border radius of like 4 pixels. And then I want to add a little bit of padding inside of our card. And then I'm going to add a little bit of margin at the bottom of each card just so there's space between each review. And then let's just replace that down below. And let's actually take a quick look at what that looks like. Okay, so it's not bad. Let's actually, okay, so that would explain that. And then actually I want to add some margin to the right as well to move it away from that wall a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, that is the wrong side. Let's see what that looks like. Cool. Okay, so now I want to just modify the style for the title and description a little bit, and then we'll come back to the rating container and the rating score. So for the title, again, I'm just going to add a little bit of padding. So let's see if we just add some padding on top initially. And then let's make the font size like 18 pixels. And then for the description, let's do padding on the bottom. We'll make the font size like 14 pixels. And let's see what that looks like. So let's just replace that down below. And then let's just jump back over and see what that looks like. Cool. Okay, so that's starting to look pretty good. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to turn this number into an actual star rating. So let's jump back over into our code. And for this, basically I want to create a rating component, but I actually want to use this rating component in both our airline show and index views. So instead of creating this inside of our airline directory, I'm actually going to create a new rating directory and create a new file and call it rating.js. And then for this, we can import React from React. And then I'm going to create a new rating component. And this will take props as an argument. And then we can just return some JSX inside of this. So for this component, it's going to be pretty simple. I just want to create like a wrapper. So I'm going to create a span with a class of like star wrapper. And then inside of this, I want to create another span. And I'm just going to give this a class, and we'll call this stars. And then we can go ahead and export our rating component. And for this component, I want to actually add another dependency to our project. I'm actually going to add font awesome so we can use their star icon for this. And then we can just start the server back up. So what we can do now is back in our review component, we can go ahead and import rating from that new rating directory we just created. And what we can do now is down in our code where we have this rating container and this rating section, we can pass in our new rating component. And what I want to do here is pass in our score as a prop to our rating component. And at this point, we can actually also just style out our rating container as well. So for this, all that I want to do is just set display to flex. And I'm going to set flex direction for our rating container to be row. And then we can just grab that. We can get rid of this, and we can replace this wrapper now. And so now what we can do with Font Awesome is back in our rating component. So I'm just going to do this with CSS in a separate file instead of using styled components. I think it'll be a little bit easier. So I'm going to create a rating.css file. And what I want to do is we're going to do a little trick using Font Awesome icons. So basically, we called our container our star wrapper. So we'll do star wrapper. And we're just basically going to give this position relative. And display we'll set to inline block. And then we called the inner class stars. So let's just create a new class for stars. And for this, we'll set position to be absolute. And then we're going to give this top 0 and left 0. And set basically overflow to hidden. And we're going to set white space to no wrap. And then we'll also give this a color. For now, we're just going to make this, let's say, yellow for our star color. So what we want to do now, the trick that we're going to do with Font Awesome is basically we can just take our star wrapper class and use the pseudo selector before. And then we can also take our stars class and use the pseudo selector before. And what we can do is set the font family to be Font Awesome now. And then what we can do is basically set the content to be stars and spaces. So we're going to do /F005 for stars and /0020 for spaces. And we're just going to do that 5 times for our max of 5 stars. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we need one more star. So what we're doing here is basically a little trick where we're layering our stars element on top of our stars wrapper element. So if you look back in here, what we can do now is we can import our CSS. We can just import rating.css. And because if we look back in our review component, we're passing down score now to rating. What we can do inside of rating is we can actually convert our score from that 1 to 5 scale into a percentage, and we can actually set that as the width on our stars element. So we can basically say like score equals, and we'll take props.score now, and we'll divide it by 5. And then what we can do is just multiply that by 100 to get the percentage score out of 100 for each rating. And then the way that this trick works is basically now we can set the style on the inner element. What we can do is just say width and set that equal to score plus percent to set the actual percentage as a width now. So let's see what that all looks like. So we should be importing our rating now into review and passing that in for the rating value here. So let's see what our reviews look like now. So I'm just going to reload the page. Cannot find module rating. Oh, it should be like that. Cool. Okay, so now you can see we're actually replacing that number score with an actual star rating value. So in this first review, we have 5 stars and then 1 star, etc. And let's replace that yellow with something a little bit less vibrant. So I'm just going to, let's see. Let's go ahead and grab that color. And we'll just come in here and replace this. And let's check that out. Cool. So it looks like that's all working. So let's jump back to like our index page. And let's see if we jump into an airline now with no reviews. And let's try to create some reviews from scratch. So I'm just going to create a fake review, and we'll give this a score of like 5 stars and submit that. You can see now as soon as we submit that, the review gets populated over on the left. So we can create another fake review with 1 star and submit that. And it looks like our star ratings are all working. And what we can do now as well, if we jump back to our index view, is because we made this into a reusable component, we can actually replace these scores on the homepage with our rating component as well. So let's go back, and inside of our airlines directory here, let's jump into, I think, airline. And let's see where we're passing in the score. Okay, so let's import rating from rating. What we should be able to do now is basically just replace this element with rating and pass in props.attributes.average score. And then we can just delete this. And let's see if that works. So I'm just going to reload this. Cool. Okay, so now we have the average score represented as a star rating on the homepage as well. So we can jump into any of these and start adding our reviews and see that populate over on the left. So the next thing that we need to do then is update these values to display an accurate average score for the airline as new reviews get added.